Hola, bona tarda a tots i a totes. En primer lloc, agrair-vos, donar-vos les gràcies per connectar-vos a aquest webinar Accedeix al mercat francès de les tecnologies mèdiques i de la salut digital, que és l'últim seminari del cicle de presentació del nou servei Expansió Digital Health and Medtech. Informar-vos que aquest seminari està finançat per fons europeus a través del programa Enterprise Europe Network. Seguidament em presento, jo soc la Leire Alfonso, la consultora sènior d'estratègia internacional especialitzada en els sectors salut i ciències de la salut digital i equipaments mèdics al món ha augmentat en els 2 últims anys i es preveu que creixi encara més, la qual cosa ofereix un ventall d'oportunitats de negoci per a les empreses del sector a Catalunya. En concret, el sistema sanitari francès és reconegut internacionalment com un dels millors del món gràcies a l'ús de les tecnologies avançades i una àmplia cobertura de la despesa mèdica. La voluntat d'integrar cada cop més les innovacions mèdiques al seu sistema sanitari presenta una gran oportunitat per a les empreses catalanes que vulguin entrar al mercat sanitari francès i comercialitzar les seves solucions amb èxit en aquest país. Per posar algunes dades, l'any 2020, el sector sanitari a França representava el 12,5% del PIB. Les 1.500 empreses especialitzades en Medtech i les 200 entitats que treballen en salut digital al país van generar respectivament 30.000 i 3.000 milions d'euros de facturació acumulada a l'any 2020. Per parlar en profunditat sobre el sistema sanitari francès, avui comptarem amb dos ponents. En primer lloc, la senyora Elisabeth Sánchez, Inward Investment Manager de Business France a Espanya, que ens oferirà una primera introducció al mercat sanitari francès. Aquesta ponència serà en castellà i també comptarem amb el senyor Michel Verasselt, fundador i president de Medtech Access, que ens parlarà sobre com vendre al sistema de salut francès una gran oportunitat i també un gran repte. La ponència en aquest cas serà en anglès. Però abans de començar amb aquestes dues ponències, el meu company, el Christophe Agneau, director de l'oficina exterior d'ACCIÓ a París, ens recordarà breument el nou servei Expansió Digital Health i Medtech. Finalment, i abans de començar una mica amb el seminari, un parell de temes tècnics. Les presentacions seran publicades a partir de demà en un enllaç que us posarem ara al xat. Informar-vos també que la sessió està sent gravada i que la gravació també serà publicada a partir de demà en el mateix enllaç. Recordar-vos, comentar-vos que podeu fer les vostres preguntes en el xat de Q&A que teniu a sota de la pantalla del Zoom, que no cal que us espereu fins al final, que les podeu anar fent a mesura que les presentacions van avançant. Com hi haurà presentacions en anglès i en castellà, us demanem que les feu en anglès directament si el ponent està parlant en anglès, o si són sobre el servei, doncs ens les podeu adreçar directament en català o en castellà. I ara sí, per començar el seminari d'avui, cedeixo la paraula al meu company, el Christophe Agneau, director de l'oficina exterior a París. Endavant, Christophe, quan vulguis.
Moltes gràcies, Leire, i bona tarda a tots i totes. Soc en Christophe Agneau, director de l'oficina d'ACCIÓ a França, basat a París. I res, us recordaré una mica l'estructura del servei que posem en marxa, com que ja l'hem explicat en el seminari del dia 25 i els seminaris d'Alemanya i de Regne Unit, seré molt breu i, per tant, us compartiré de moment una petita presentació molt ràpida. La idea d'aquest servei neix de la complexitat per entendre i accedir als mercats europeus de la salut. És, per tant, que hem dissenyat un programa que està dividit en 3 grans etapes, quin objectiu és informar, formar i acompanyar-vos per detectar oportunitats, avaluar la vostra cabuda al mercat i entendre els reptes per entrar-hi. Passaré a la segona slide, perdona, ja està. I aquí teniu aquests 3 grans parts que hem dissenyat. La part d'avui, que seria la sessió per informar-se, és aquest overview del sector que tenim gràcies a Business France i gràcies a la sessió de la consultoria Medtech Access que presentarà a continuació. La idea és tenir una idea de les oportunitats de l'organització del sistema de salut públic i privat, saber com accedir al mercat i al sistema de reemborsament i també la plaça de la innovació en aquest mercat francès. Després d'aquest seminari sobre la convocatòria, de fet ja us podeu inscriure en aquest link que veieu a baix de la pantalla, i us demanarem després que omplessiu un formulari, un qüestionari sobre la vostra tecnologia, la vostra empresa, que heu d'omplir abans del 22 d'abril i la convocatòria també tanca el 22 d'abril. A partir d'aquest qüestionari formulari l'analitzarem tant des de l'oficina exterior d'ACCIÓ com des de la consultoria que treballem nosaltres per fer una selecció competitiva de les empreses que participaran. El nostre objectiu és tenir un mínim de 6 empreses i un màxim de 10 empreses per poder oferir realment un servei personalitzat a totes les empreses d'aquesta primera edició del servei Expansió Digital Health. La segona fase, la segona part d'aquest servei és el que nosaltres diem la fase 1, que ja és la fase amb les empreses seleccionades, que és una fase de formació i de preparació que es farà en 2 etapes. Primer amb uns workshops en grups, que es podria fer 1 o 2 workshops en funció de les necessitats de les empreses, és a dir, que si hi ha realment unes necessitats comunes faríem un sol workshop o si no ho podríem dividir en funció de les necessitats de les empreses, però seria un treball en grup. Aquests workshops es faran basant-nos sobre les respostes al qüestionari, aquest formulari que omplireu. Per això és molt important que hi poséssiu tots els detalls sobre les vostres, no només la vostra empresa, sinó també les vostres necessitats. Després d'aquests workshops, cada empresa participant al programa tindrà una reunió individual de 2 hores amb la consultoria i conjuntament amb un consultor, una consultora de l'oficina exterior d'ACCIÓ. I aquesta reunió individual realment és un coaching individual i personalitzat per avaluar les característiques de l'empresa i poder fer unes recomanacions sobre la millor manera d'entrar al mercat. I això es faria després d'aquesta reunió individual a través de l'informe de recomanacions per l'entrada al mercat. Arran d'aquesta primera fase, després l'última fase seria la fase d'acompanyament. D'acompanyament a nivell comercial, a nivell de prospecció, quan sigui necessari i en funció dels resultats de la fase 1. És a dir, que aquesta fase l'engegarem des de l'oficina exterior d'ACCIÓ, que és un acompanyament que us detallaré a continuació, de l'oficina exterior per realment entrar al mercat i contactar amb els bons socis comercials, poden ser clients, distribuïdors, i també aquí contemplarem la possible participació a esdeveniments de referència del sector, com poden ser Medfit el mes de setembre o Santexpo l'any que ve. Com us deia abans, per aquesta part inicial, per aquesta fase 1, tenim, i per a la ponència d'avui, tenim la sort de tenir l'acompanyament d'una consultoria reconeguda a França, Medtech Access, que és una consultoria especialitzada, amb el seu fundador, Michel Verasselt, que coneixereu després, que té més de 28 anys d'experiència a la indústria dels dispositius mèdics i de serveis de salut. Per tant, realment una consultoria molt especialitzada que té com a característica treballar per a empreses estrangeres que vulguin entrar al mercat francès, entre altres. I té una molt llarga expertesa que ens permetrà saber si realment conèixer tots els reptes per entrar al mercat, saber totes les pautes per seguir i poder tenir una estratègia d'entrada molt consolidada. A qui va dirigit aquest programa? Doncs, òbviament, a empreses del sector de salut digital i dels dispositius mèdics. I el que és important és que tingui una certa maduresa. Ho hem dit al principi, el mercat francès de la salut és un mercat molt madur, molt complicat, i per tant les empreses han de poder fer front a tots aquests reptes que suposen molt sovint una inversió inicial que necessita que l'empresa tingui una certa maduresa i una certa experiència a nivell internacional per poder tenir les millors garanties d'èxits. Però, òbviament, valorem totes les sol·licituds de les empreses perquè tenim altres maneres d'ajudar-vos si no entreu en aquest programa. Molt ràpid. Les característiques del servei és que hem definit que no es podia entrar a la fase 2 d'accés al mercat, és a dir, de gestions comercials, sense haver passat la fase 1, perquè la fase 1 realment pensem, jo ho he explicat abans, és necessària per tenir l'estratègia d'entrada al mercat i estar ben preparats i no llançar-se, tirar-se a la piscina sense tenir realment totes les pautes a seguir. Nosaltres, com a oficina exterior, estem involucrats en totes les fases del servei, encara que hi hagi l'acompanyament de la consultoria. Nosaltres, de principi a final, acompanyem a totes les etapes d'aquest programa. I, us he dit abans, els qüestionaris ens serviran per avaluar les tecnologies, les propostes de les empreses i la selecció es farà conjuntament amb la consultoria per escollir les possibles 10 empreses que poden participar. I, òbviament, totes les despeses de viatge i d'organització, en el cas d'una participació a una fira o una reunió al mercat in situ, no estan incloses en aquesta proposta, que està, com podeu veure ara en pantalla, beneficia d'una subvenció substancial. De fet, el seminari d'avui està finançat per Enterprise Europe Network, que per tant no té cap cost i està obert a totes les empreses. I després, tant per la fase 1 com per la fase 2, hi ha una bonificació important d'acció, una subvenció directa, que enguany, amb el context que hi ha a Europa, el context de la situació geopolítica, es beneficia d'un descompte addicional molt important. Per tant, la fase 1 estaríem parlant d'uns 185 euros per empresa per als workshops de grup més les hores d'assessorament individual i després per la fase 2 l'acompanyament de l'oficina exterior, aquí uns 800 euros per fins a 80 hores de consultoria de l'oficina exterior. Això no inclou, si després necessiteu un acompanyament per part de la consultoria privada o de qualsevol consultoria privada fora d'ACCIÓ, doncs aquí sí que seria una facturació directa, però ja seria en un altre moment. I res, per acabar, agrair les entitats col·laboradores a Catalunya que ens han ajudat a muntar i a difondre aquest programa arran de les empreses de l'ecosistema. Molt agraïts perquè hem tingut molt bona participació i estem tenint avui també una molt bona participació per part de les empreses. Moltes gràcies, Leire. Torno la pantalla i seguim.
Gràcies, Christoph. Ara ja passo ràpidament la paraula a la Elisabet Sánchez. A veure si surt en pantalla, Elisabet. Muchas gracias por tu colaboración. Adelante.
Hola, Leire, muchas gracias. A ver si puedo compartir por aquí. A ver, no sé si se ve bien.
Sí, Elisabet, se está viendo. Lo único que se ve con las dos pantallas. Tendrías que hacer un poco lo que hemos hecho antes de los parámetros. La siguiente aquí, exacto.
Ahora lo veis bien, ¿no?
Ahora lo vemos bien, perfecto. Gracias, Elisabet.
Gracias a ti. Vale, pues muchas gracias a ACCIÓ por invitarme a este webinario. Es un placer estar con vosotros esta tarde. Muchas gracias, Christoph, Leire y Sonia. Bueno, yo, como ya ha adelantado Leire, trabajo en el Departamento de Inversiones de Business France para la península ibérica y voy a estar presentando en unos 10 minutos aproximadamente, así que de manera rápida y superficial las oportunidades de inversión en el sector de la salud en Francia. Y para ello, pues me gustaría comenzar por presentar rápidamente cuáles son nuestras misiones y quién es Business France en definitiva. Business France es la agencia de internacionalización de la economía francesa. La mayor parte de la actividad de la agencia es el acompañamiento a las pymes francesas en sus exportaciones, que representa más o menos el 85% de la actividad de Business France. Luego está el departamento de inversiones en el que yo trabajo, que se dedica a acompañar a las empresas extranjeras, en mi caso portuguesas y españolas, en sus inversiones en Francia. Y cuando hablamos de inversiones hablamos de implantación directa, es decir, de creación de una filial, de generación de valor añadido, de creación de empleo. Otra de las misiones sería la promoción del atractivo de Francia como destino para los negocios y, por último, la promoción y gestión de la solución de recursos humanos conocida como VIE, Voluntariado Internacional en Empresa, que sería una figura similar al becario del ICEX, que me imagino que os sonará. Si entramos un poco más en detalle en el departamento de inversiones, nuestro objetivo es el acompañamiento, como decía, a las empresas españolas en sus inversiones en Francia en diferentes tipos de proyectos. Entonces, desde aquellas empresas que aún no están presentes en el territorio francés, como aquellas que sí que ya están presentes y desean continuar a expandirse, también adquisiciones de empresas y búsqueda de partners tecnológicos o proyectos de I+D. ¿Y cómo hacemos este acompañamiento? Pues bien, a través de una red de partners en cada una de las regiones de Francia, lo que hacemos es que, en base a un business plan a 3 años vista definido por la empresa, que describe sus condiciones suspensivas para realizar este proyecto, lo que vamos a hacer es solicitar a nuestros partners regionales que formulen una propuesta hecha a medida para el proyecto, de tal manera que resulte pues una especie de fast track para encontrar la manera más competitiva para llevar a cabo y ejecutar lo mejor posible este proyecto. Estas propuestas pueden incluir pues, desde cuestiones reglamentarias, datos de mercado, identificación de posibles competidores, de potenciales partners, búsqueda de oficinas, terrenos, ayuda y acompañamiento en la búsqueda de personal, facilitación de contactos tanto públicos como privados, y todo ello pues lo hacemos de manera totalmente confidencial y, por supuesto, gratuita. Para adentrarnos un poco más en materia, me gustaría hacer un pequeño panorama tras el anuncio, ¿no?, del informe anual de las inversiones extranjeras publicado por Business France cada año. Y es que bueno, Francia se ha posicionado durante 2 años consecutivos como el primer o el país más atractivo de Europa para las inversiones internacionales, y esta tendencia se ha mantenido también en 2021 con el registro de más de 1.600 proyectos de inversión que han implicado pues, la creación de aproximadamente 45.000 empleos, es decir, más de un 30% adicional respecto al año anterior. En cuanto al flujo proveniente de las empresas españolas, por llevarlo un poco a nuestro mercado, hemos visto un crecimiento del 12%. Nos llama la atención que más de 2/3 de los proyectos que se han registrado el año pasado provienen de Europa, y de hecho Alemania se ha posicionado como primer inversor extranjero por delante de Estados Unidos. Y otro dato llamativo es que ha habido un aumento considerable de los proyectos industriales, 460 para ser exactos, o sea, un aumento del 49%. Y por nuestra parte, proveniente de España, desde Business France hemos acompañado unos 55 proyectos, afianzando así la posición de Francia como primer destino europeo para las inversiones provenientes de España. Y una de las explicaciones que podríamos dar sería que tras una contracción de los flujos de inversión extranjera en el año 2020 a consecuencia de la pandemia y de la crisis del COVID, es que en 2021 hemos vuelto a ver un repunte. Como decía, esto probablemente se explique, ¿no?, por la rápida respuesta que también ha tenido el gobierno francés a la hora de poner en marcha el plan de reactivación de la economía francesa, que ha sido un plan muy ambicioso de 100.000 millones de euros para reactivar la economía tras esta crisis, pero también para promover un crecimiento pues, duradero a través de 3 ejes principales, que son los que ven aquí en pantalla, ¿no? La transición ecológica, la competitividad y la cohesión territorial y social. Y todo ello a través del establecimiento, pues, de unos sectores labelizados como estratégicos por el gobierno francés, entre los cuales está la salud, pero también el sector agroalimentario, el sector electrónico, el sector de todas las industrias del 5G y todo aquello que tiene que ver con, al final, la digitalización y la transición hacia, pues, una industria más verde. Y bueno, como continuación al plan de reactivación, se ha puesto en marcha el plan France 2030, que es un plan puesto en marcha para construir la nación de mañana, ¿no?, en torno, pues, a estos sectores estratégicos que ya hemos mencionado y en torno al desarrollo, ¿no?, de la competitividad industrial y de las tecnologías del futuro, que se describen en 3 ejes principales, que es producir mejor, vivir mejor, ahí se ve el sector de la salud, ¿no?, y entender mejor el mundo. Entonces, haciendo un focus más preciso sobre el sector de la salud, vemos que el objetivo de Francia es construir una nación soberana e innovadora en este sector. Cabe destacar que se van a destinar más de 7.000 millones de euros para ello. Y al final, pues, teniendo en cuenta que en 2020 el sector de la salud fue tendencia, ¿no?, en Francia, trayendo, pues, muchos proyectos, hemos visto que en 2021 se ha confirmado esta tendencia con más de 33% más de proyectos este año. Hemos visto proyectos de naturaleza muy variada, desde proyectos industriales hasta proyectos de I+D, tanto de la industria farmacéutica como de los dispositivos médicos y también de la health tech. Estos fondos, como veis, están aquí descritos a qué se destinarán, pero el abanico es muy amplio, puesto que abarca, pues, desde la investigación hasta los ensayos clínicos, hasta los dispositivos médicos, los proyectos industriales, pero también muy destinados a todo lo que tiene que ver con el crecimiento y la industrialización de las startups. Al final, la idea que quiero transmitir es que Francia es, ¿no?, the place to be para las empresas del sector de la salud. Francia se encuentra en primera posición en número de patentes, cuenta con más de 400 complejos industriales para acoger estos proyectos y, sobre todo, también destacar la cuestión del talento, ¿no? Francia dispone de un talento muy bien formado, de un talento muy competitivo, un pool de ingenieros de más de 1 millón en Francia y, al final, pues, casi la mitad de los menores de 35 años disponen de una titulación de máster o de doctorado. Al final, Francia se posiciona como el 5º mercado a nivel mundial en el sector de la salud y es que dispone de un ecosistema muy favorable y muy propicio para la innovación. Lo estamos viendo, pues, a través de la cantidad de startups que se están desarrollando en Francia, de la cantidad de startups que Francia está trayendo y que se están convirtiendo también en unicornios. Contamos con más de 2.000 startups, de las cuales hay 750 biotech y, bueno, habréis oído hablar de ACCIÓ, que es el mayor campus de empresas emergentes del mundo, incluso por delante de Silicon Valley. Vamos a ver rápidamente el sector de los dispositivos médicos. Francia es el 2º país en el sector de los dispositivos médicos, con más de 1.500 empresas. y es que encuentran un ecosistema muy adaptado y muy favorable para desarrollarse, por ejemplo, a través de los 9 clústeres de innovación que hay a lo largo y ancho de la geografía francesa, que al final se componen y reagrupan pues, a grandes corporates, a centros de investigación y desarrollo punteros, centros tecnológicos, asociaciones y también, por supuesto, empresas innovadoras. En cuanto al sistema de la e-health o de la health tech, bueno, en Francia contamos con un sistema de seguridad social que cubre muchísimos gastos, el 77% de los gastos asociados a la salud, y también se está beneficiando de esta tendencia, ¿no?, de la digitalización que ha sido pues, acelerada a causa o gracias a la pandemia del COVID-19, y es que otro de los incentivos que estas empresas están encontrando y que están ayudándoles a decidirse por Francia como destino para sus inversiones es el crédito fiscal a la innovación, que es uno de los más potentes a nivel mundial y que permite pues, desgravarse, ¿no?, el 30% de los gastos de I+D de los primeros 100 millones de gastos en ello y el cubrimiento de los gastos de la contratación de un joven doctor durante los 2 primeros años. Con lo cual vemos que hay pues, todo un ecosistema y una serie de incentivos que hacen pues, de Francia un destino muy atractivo para el desarrollo de este tipo de proyectos. Y como decía, uno de los atractivos más mencionados por las empresas españolas y más recurrente y también a nivel internacional ha sido la rápida respuesta del gobierno francés ante una situación de crisis, pero sobre todo el establecimiento de un calendario, de un desglose transparente de las ayudas y subvenciones que estaban disponibles para acompañar estos proyectos de inversión y también la descripción de los criterios para poder beneficiarse de ello, ¿no? De hecho, de 2020 a 2021 se han multiplicado por 4 los proyectos que han sido apoyados, ¿no?, por estos incentivos del gobierno, y una tercera parte provenían del sector de la salud precisamente. Así que bueno, no quiero alargarme más, pero quería hacer un rápido resumen de las ideas principales que creo que son importantes y con las que nos tendríamos que quedar, y es que bueno, la fortaleza de Francia se ha demostrado en los últimos años, pero también en este contexto de crisis. Me quedaría con 2 palabras, que sería competitividad y resiliencia. Mencionar que el sector de la salud está labelizado como un sector estratégico y prioritario para el gobierno francés ahora mismo y para los próximos años dentro del Plan Estratégico Francia 2030, que el ecosistema es favorable y que aunque es un mercado muy maduro hay lugar para nuevos players. Y finalmente, pues que tanto ACCIÓ como Business France estamos a vuestra entera disposición como siempre y encantados de escuchar vuestros proyectos. Sin olvidarme mencionar que nuestras actividades son perfectamente complementarias porque compartimos una misión conjunta que es el acompañamiento de las empresas en la búsqueda de las soluciones más competitivas para el desarrollo de los proyectos. Y por tanto, pues ambas partes estaremos muy contentos de escuchar todos los proyectos de inversión que tengáis o proyectos en Francia que tengáis. Os dejo mis datos de contacto aquí, también Leire seguramente los facilitará al final de esta sesión para que me podáis hacer llegar vuestras preguntas o entréis en contacto conmigo si lo consideráis. Y nada, agradeceros de nuevo por haberme escuchado y por haber contado con mi participación. Que tengáis buena tarde.
Muchas gracias, Elizabeth. Gracias por esta pequeña introducción que nos sirve de marco perfecto, ¿no?, para pasar a la siguiente ponencia sobre precisamente cómo acceder, ¿no?, a este mercado francés con tantas oportunidades para las empresas catalanas. So now I pass the floor directly to Mr. Michel Persahelt. Thank you very much for your collaboration. And now the floor is yours, the screen is yours.
So, hello everybody. Thank you very much, ACCIÓ, for this invitation. So I'm very happy to present you after this presentation of Business France from Elisabeth Sanchez. So I'm happy to present the market access pathways for medical devices in France. My presentation, so my name is Michel Ferracelt, and as Christophe Arnoux already said, so I am a health economist. I worked during the last 30 years in medical device, and I created Medtech Access 10 years ago in order to support and help medical device company in their strategy and implementation of reimbursement solutions in France. So my presentation will be first to overview the French healthcare system, and then, we will focus on reimbursement, the specific reimbursement on the French reimbursement list. We will look at different pathways for innovation funding. We will focus also on the new e-health reimbursement possibilities, with also mentioning specifically a French experimentation, which is ETAP, which is a little bit the equivalent of the DIGA in Germany. And then we'll finish with the go-to-market solution that we can propose in parallel of market access. The overview, well, I mean, you know, like in any country, sometimes the French system is perceived as quite complex, which it is, but it's also the perception from outside of the country, because if we look deeply in the German system, it is complex. If you talk to American people, they will see it as complex. But basically, what we should keep in mind is that we have a national organization and regional organization. At national level, we have the different institutions at the ministry level, which will normally decide on the authorization of a product or a drug and the price, the tariff. And independently, we have the High Healthcare Authority, the HAS, which is the evaluation body, the French HTA, Health Technology Assessment, which has different commissions, a commission for evaluation of pharmaceutical and a specific commission for medical devices, which is called the CNEDIMS, which evaluates the medical devices, the diagnostics, and also the therapeutic procedures. So they have two different commissions for that, one commission for the acts or procedures, and a commission for the medical device. And at the regional, we have also at the ministry level the CPS, which is the Economical Committee, which decides on the tariffs, and ATIH, which is the French DRG agencies, and also the payer, which is called the UNOCAM. And we have a different institution at regional levels, which are called ARS, regional healthcare agencies, which are more and more power, because France up to now was very much centralized as a country. In the funding of the system, in 2018, we had this structure, which, I mean, this is probably quite unique, because we have one global insurance system, which covers almost 80% of the healthcare cost. And on top of that, we have a voluntary complementary private insurance, which covers about 13 to 14%. We have 1.5% government coverage and 7% out of pocket. So the specificity, we don't have a separate private insurance in France. The private insurance will complete the reimbursement, which has been authorized by the compulsory national insurance. Also, the pathway, the global pathway that we have to keep in mind is this, and it is important for companies to have this in their mind. So we, the first step is to have a CE mark with notified bodies, and then we can go to reimbursement. and discuss with national French authority and get it. So the CE mark is a prerequisite to get reimbursement in France. This slide presents the 3 keys to go into the French market. Basically, there are 3 keys. One is intra-DRG, the hospital package. I will go into this point in details later. The other one is on top of the DRG, so the reimbursement on the French reimbursement list. And the last one is the dedicated medical code for procedure. We may, if you are not in these 3 keys, you will not get, I would say, official national reimbursement. But sometimes, and this is important to keep in mind, and we'll come back to this point later, there is a way when a company has a CE mark, when the company is on its way to get reimbursement, to have some alternative case-by-case possibilities to negotiate local innovation funding in a dedicated hospital. We also have 2 sectors. One is public and one is private, but they are, I mean, the public and the private sector are equally funded by the national coverage. This is important. This slide shows you that depending on the countries, some countries will probably be more sensitive to clinical evidence. This is the case for France, for Switzerland, for Germany. I mean, in the middle, you have countries where cost effectiveness and health economy will be more sensitive, like UK, Netherlands, Canada, Australia, Sweden, and on the right, countries where, I mean, we are the decision are more on budgetary impact data, like Italy, Spain, China, etc. So that's not black and white, but that's more or less important. But what is important also, even if a country will open the door because of strong clinical evidence, it doesn't mean that the other ones don't need it. And it's always good to have a global clinical plan, but to know exactly when we will use it in a specific dedicated country. And of course, France is very sensitive to clinical evidence to open the market. In this, we have this funding of the outpatient sector in the hospital. So this is also a pathway that the company should have in mind. So it's always very good to know when we, at the stage where we have, even before the CE mark, actually, we had the R&D status or development status, to think about how my device will end up in the French system. So we know that the questions are: is it a hospital? Is it something which will be used in a hospital or in the city? And if it's in the hospital, do I have already a code, a CCAM code, which is the list for procedures, or should I get to LPP and check it? And if yes or not, should I, what is my DRG code? And if there is a DRG code, then of course I know that I don't need to do specific actions for CCAM or LPP. Otherwise, let's follow into this pathway. If I am on the turn, the same questions: do I have a medical procedure? And if yes, no problem. If no, I should probably explore this pathway. Should I fall into a dedicated LPPR? And then that is the same. I have to explore this pathway to be listed on the LPPR. So if we consider now that we have to go one of these different pathways, so if we talk about CCAM, the CCAM is again the medical procedure code. It has to be a dossier, a filing, which is submitted to the French HAS through the medical society. And then once the process is finished, we fall into the procedure code list at the UN, and this decision is done by the national payer, the UNCAM. If I have to explore, and this is the responsibility of the company. So the first one is not directly the responsibility of the company, but indirectly, yes, and but with the help of the healthcare professionals. If I have to go and be listed on the LPPR, then of course I have to compile a dossier and submit it to us and the commission that will decide if it is eligible to this list is the CNEDIMS, and they will decide positively or negatively and give a different ranking to the device. And then once the decision is taken by us, then the decision will go to the CPS, which will then negotiate with the company about the price and the tariff. If the medical device is directly included in DRG, then no need to get to LPP, no need to get through the CCAM, but then of course either there is an existing DRG and that's fine, and we can go directly and sell to the hospitals. Well, these are the different budgets. So for at the hospital level, so the hospital stay in the hospital is funded through a French DRG. Maybe some of you know it. It's also called T2A, T2A, activity tariff. That is the DRG, the envelope, and the tariff is called GHS, but the international name is DRG. That will cover the payment of the hospitalization. And then we have specific budgets for expensive drugs and medical devices, which is the LPP, and on top of that, there is another envelope which is called MIGAC, only for university and regional hospitals, which are dedicated for innovation, for research, and for education. So the way the DRG works, it's a mix through a specific algorithm between administrative information on the patient and some clinical information, so the ICD, the diagnostic code, and the procedure code. So this information during the stay of the patient is mixed and create a specific DRG, and then the hospital will be able to invoice the payer for the DRG, and if possible, with the LPPR code, and these two envelopes will be addressed and will fund the hospital. So if the medical device is eligible for the LPPR, this is the way to go. So once the product has a CE mark, we do the dossier, we present it to the HAS. The HAS will decide whether this will be positively appraised for reimbursement. It's called the SA, expected result. It has to be positive. If it's positive, then they will decide for the ASA, the improvement of the expected result. And this ASA will get from 5 to 1. 5 means that the medical device is equivalent to another existing device already reimbursed. And 1 means that it has been considered and evaluated as a breakthrough innovation. So depending on the ASA level, the CPS, the economical committee, and also depending on the cost structure of the device, of course, they will negotiate with the industry, with the company about the price. And it could take, it could be very quick if the price is the same, equivalent to another one. Sometimes it can take weeks or months, because you have to think that this decision here in France is the unique, it's like a national tender. You do it just once. So like in many other countries, you have many tenders at hospital level. In France, you have one big tariff decision, which is here with the CPS. So when it's decided, when it's done, actually the price is fixed and you can use it in any French hospital. So this is something I always mention because it's sometimes perceived as quite difficult to get, but if you get it, you're very happy because then the sales process can be very easy. So it's published in the French official journal and it goes to the LPPR listing. So the LPPR is split up into 5 titles, 5 parts. The title 1 are medical devices for life support, dietary foods and article for dressing. So these are also the different devices which are used at home, like for example COPD devices, asthma, CPAP, etc., mainly delivered by home care providers. Also oncology devices, so all kinds of devices, mainly those which are used at home by the patient. So the title 2 are mainly the devices which are sold through the pharmacy. So these are ortheses and external prostheses. This can be also glasses, for example, dental products. All these devices are in title 2. In title 3, these are the implants, which are mainly used in hospitals. Title 4 are the vehicles for ambulatory and disabled people, and Title 5 are the invasive devices. So difference between the Title 3 and Title 5 is Title 3 are implants, and I remind you that implants are the devices which are inside the body more than 30 days, and the invasive devices are those which are within the body less than 30 days. For example, in Title 3, you will find the stents, you will find the heart valves, the many neurological devices. In Title 5, you will, for example, find the balloons, vascular balloons, FFR, fractional flow reserve devices, etc. Again, so the process is with the HAS is we got a positive essay, and this positive essay is based on different criteria. Those criteria are the severity of the pathology, the epidemiology of the pathology, the therapeutic alternatives, the effect, and the risks. So the place in the therapeutic strategy, the ability to respond to a therapeutic need and the impact on the organization. Sometimes it can be more or less one of these criteria, but all these criteria have to be explained in the file that is presented to the HAS. And the ASA level is really based on comparative data. So depending on what is the comparator, then what are the criteria for improvement, what is the comparative study, is it strong enough, then of course the decision will be taken. So a strong with very good results randomized control study with sham, for example, will probably be very well perceived by the HAS and provide a better ASA level. So basically, if you get a 5, that means that the device is considered as equivalent, and of course, the requirement for higher prices will be limited. If then you get, for example, a 4, normally you get less, even the 5, you may get a little rebate compared to the existing devices. A 4 means same price, and then only with the 3, 2, and 1, you will get a much better price compared to the comparator. So the added value of a medical device is demonstrated by clinical trials, and several types of trials may be selected by the Canadians. But then, of course, they will look at different aspects of the trial. Now, what I was talking about is what we call the common law pathway, so the ultimate pathway. But there are other tools available in France that you have to keep in mind for alternative funding pathway. You have the innovation package, for example, and I will explain later what it is, and I will explain later all of these possibilities. And again, this is very important in the strategy to have all these possibilities in your mind, because you can use them before getting to LPPR. You can use them, for example, innovation package, hospital clinic programs can be used very early, because these are clinical studies which are well funded by the French authority. The early access is very new. It's something which has been released last year. It's when you are not completely finished with a clinical trial, but with a very promising product, you can get on the French market 1 year or even 2 years before you will finish the clinical trial. So this is called, the condition is that it has to be a unique product, no alternative, and of course, a strong clinical trial which is not yet finished. REHN is for the diagnostics, and ETAP and Article 51 are for telemedicine and organizational innovation. So this slide can be found on the French Ministry of Health. So they want to sell these the different programs that are available in the French system, from the identification of a new concept to reimbursement. So you can use all these different tools. And even before, for example, CE mark, you can have a PHRC. At CE mark level, you can use the PRMO, which is a health economical study. Then you can use the innovation package. So the main difference between the hospital programs and innovation package is that PHRC and PRMO are programs that are under the responsibility of the medical teams or hospital teams. So it needs a very good collaboration between the industry and the hospitals and the medical team, as the innovation package is directly under the responsibility of the industry. And the same for REHN and the same for PECT. So talking about the innovation package, basically you have to keep in mind it is an early funding, but which is a combination of a clinical program and a partial reimbursement. So you are not eligible for innovation package if you don't have a clinical program in your mind. The objective is to fund an innovation, which can be a medical device, a diagnostic, or a medical procedure, until it is reimbursed on a permanent basis on the LPPR or on the CCAM. The condition is to set up a new clinical study comparing the innovation to the clinical practice or to the gold standard. So it has to be a strong clinical study, because you pretend to show an innovation. And if it's not supported by a strong clinical comparative study, then that will not be, that will probably not be selected by the HAS. And there should be implementation modalities, so creation of a temporary hospital stay. What is the innovation package? Actually, this is a kind of DRG. So this is a kind of hospital package which will include the hospital stay, which will include the cost of the device and the medical fees. So the eligibility of a product or a procedure is when it is innovative, novelty, early diffusion, safety, important clinical benefit, potential clinical benefit, and also supported by a clinical trial or a health economical study design, which is considered by HAS to be relevant. So the dossier should be submitted to the health authority, and this dossier has 3 parts. One, it's a dossier, actually a reimbursement dossier, like a light LPPR dossier. The second part is a complete study protocol, and the last part is a budget. The budget is in 3 parts, because the company is responsible to present this budget with the cost of the clinical study, which are basically under the responsibility of the company, and of course the cost of the hospitalization, etc., which will be the new innovative package, and the cost also estimate the cost which will fall into the normal reimbursement. So there's a specific table which is on the French Ministry of Health, and which show you how you have to execute this budget. So the cost sharing within the innovation package is this. So the study costs are paid by the industry. The reference treatment, for example, the control arm, is paid in the normal reimbursement scheme by the health insurance, and the innovation part is paid by the innovation package. So basically, a pathway could be this one. For example, you have a plan. Okay, so if you had a plan in 2021, you prepare in 2021 the dossier, you submit it in early 2022, then they will, yeah, so basically when they will decide, if they decide in early 2022 that your device is eligible for the innovation package, or during the initiation and the inclusion, they will finance the device. And after the inclusion, there will be a year or 2 years after the inclusion in order to prepare, for example, the clinical report and prepare then a new reimbursement dossier. So this intermediate period will be also covered. And also one important point is in this innovation package, let's say, for example, if it includes in France 10 centers, only the 10 centers will be eligible for the reimbursement. But an innovation package can also have centers which are not located in France. So basically, for example, we got just an example. We had a US company. It was a startup. They had a clinical study for FDA in the US, but they had a plan to have an arm in Europe with centers in Germany, in the UK, and Italy, I think. And then we said, okay, why don't you put also a significant number of centers in France and create a forfait innovation package? And this is what they did actually, and it was accepted. And today they have 10 centers, and it's exactly the same protocol as in the US, with the American arm used for FDA approval, and the European arm used within the innovation package for reimbursement perspective, French reimbursement perspective, but also with other centers in Europe, with the objective to also be used by other European countries. So now we talk PHRC and PRME. That could be significant envelopes, because this is between 500,000 euros and 2 million. But basically, unlike the two main difference between these programs and the forfait innovation, first is, as I said before, it's executed by the medical teams or the hospitals. So it means that if a company thinks that they should do a PHRC, they should talk to the medical team and push them and decide together. The only thing is that also you don't have a complete control of the clinical protocol, and it means that the relationship should be good if you want to be part, for example, of the team that will decide on the protocol. And the part of the device could be funded. So if the main objective is clinical, then it's a PHRC. If the primary endpoint is health economical, you should probably choose a PRME. So these are the different steps because there are 2 steps and there's a selection. So there's a pre-selection of a dossier and it's submitted 1 time per year. When the window is open, you can submit the dossier. Couple of months later, you will see if the project has been selected, and then there's a second round with the complete protocol, and about 6 months later you get the final decision and the study can start maybe 1 year later. So these are the different eligibility criteria for the PHRC. You have to justify the direct impact of expected results on the management of patients, and the methods will provide data with a high level of evidence. And there's also different levels. So there are PHRC at national level in France, and there are a specific envelope also for cancer. So for PRM, there's a separate pathway, but with these different objectives which are described in this slide. And the eligibility is different because the objective is the primary endpoint again is health economical. Basically, this is here the different the timing for the selection of the budget. And once it's been, there's an important point because in the past, the French authority, they were a little bit disappointed that sometimes the money that they were allocated was not really used for the clinical funding. So now they decide that they will not deliver the money immediately. They will deliver it on 3 different stages. At 25% of the money at the initiation of the clinical study, 50% 6 months later, and the rest when they will receive the clinical report. Now this is a new early access. The principle of the early access again is to facilitate the introduction of an innovative device when it's a little bit too early, but we think there's a kind of urgent need to make it available for the patient when there is no alternative. So the process is, of course, the device has to be CE marked, but of course there's no reimbursement existing in the hospital at that moment, and the process will be really short. I mean, this is again a light dossier. It has to be submitted, and normally 6 months later you will get the final decision. It's a really accelerated reimbursement procedure, and they say there's no price negotiation. So we have our first product, which has been negotiated 2 months ago, and I can tell you we could negotiate a little bit on the price, but normally you fix a price. What is important is in France, and this is a very important information, they will look at the European prices. So when we negotiated the price, so we wanted to, for the device, we wanted to get a certain price, which was a little bit higher than in Germany, but they knew about the German price, and finally we had to accept the German price. So the pathway is this one. So it's in total about 6 months. So you start with CE mark, you submit the dossier to the CNEDIMS. Once it's been decided with a go, then it gets to the minister for decision, and then you get a decision for the price, and it's published in the official journal. The big difference between a PCT and the innovation package, it's not limited to a fixed number of hospitals. If you get it, you will be able to sell the device to all French hospitals, public and private, no limit. The only thing is that it's limited. Well, I mean, you will get about 2 years in the timing if you get it. So the main thing to keep in mind for PCT eligibility is that the treatment, it's a treatment of a serious or rare disease. There should not be any relevant therapeutic alternative. It should potentially have a significant improvement in the health status or compensate a disability of the patient. It should be a genuine innovation, and also clinically relevant with a clinically relevant efficacy and acceptable potential adverse effects. So basically, they will look at the study, which is not finished yet, but it has to be a strong study. One example of timeline for someone who wants to submit an early access dossier, Q1 2022, you will write the dossier and submit it. Q1, Q2, well, 5 months is the process to obtain the PECT, and anticipate the submission of an LPPR dossier 1 year after the submission. So it means that in this case, for example, if you get your PECT in September, but you have submitted your dossier in May, so the clock will start in May, and you have to submit an LPPR dossier before May 2023. So you will get all this time between now and May 2023, but then when you submit your LPPR dossier in May 2023, the time for this dossier to be evaluated and the time for the price negotiation, which is about an additional year, will be also funded. So in total, in this case, you get 1.5 years reimbursement compared to the normal situation when you don't have this device. So the first device which we took care, it's a Canadian company, it's a Canadian startup. They are very happy today because they could be on the French market 2 years before what they expected with the price they wanted. So we get a positive HHS opinion 42 days after the complete application. It was in the French official journal in March, so which is about 140 days after the complete application. Of course, we have a more negative also example with the praxis, which I mean could be understood because the reason why they rejected it is because there was a serious pathology only for depressive episodes of moderate to severe intensity. It was not strongly likely to provide significant improvement in the health status. It was not likely to provide clinically relevant efficacy and significant effect with respect to which the adverse effects were acceptable. So just to come back once again on Neovasc, so the device was for refractory angina and there was absolutely no treatment. So the patients were, it's not a big target population, but there was no treatment. And so the patients will just keep their disease and die little by little. So this is really effective, and that's really treating patients with absolutely no alternative. So now let's talk about e-health. So I don't want to be too long on this part, but it's to let you understand that basically there are two main possibilities. One is the traditional pathway. So with digital product, which are individual solutions, you will go to the LPP just like any other medical device. Now there are some other digital solutions which are more in the telemedicine experimentation. I will talk to you later. This is not individual solution, and there's been a new experimentation which is now close to the end, and we'll go to the normal reimbursement. So I will explain you the difference between the two. If you have an individual device like medical device with artificial intelligence, connected medical device, then you will be potentially eligible for evaluation by the CNEDIMS. And these are the conditions here. So, the different areas to be anticipated, it has to, like for others, I mean, you need to have a clinical development programs. You have to think about, like any other device, about the criteria for evaluation by the CNEDIMS, and to think about the potential real-life data collection. So the couple of examples, Diabeo was an application from Sanofi which has been submitted to the LPP and got a positive appraisal. Then the second one is an Israeli company, is MoveCare, is for oncology, for breast cancer. for lung cancer, and Move Care got a positive assay and moderate assay, ASA, so with a normal reimbursement process, because it's an individual possibility. The last example is Diabeloop. It's a French startup. This is a closed loop for diabetes patients. And this system, again, was dedicated for individual patient, even if it's artificial intelligence, but combined with a insulin pump and glucose sensor, and they got a positive assay with ASA3, and they are now reimbursed. So now there's experimentation of ETAP. So ETAP, to come back to the history, it's based on an article in the French legislation, which was released in 2010 with different categories of telemedicine. So teleconsultation and teleexpertise, for example, these are two pathways that were in experimentation until 2018. And because of the COVID crisis, and because people could not go to physical consultation, it has been sped up and integrated within normal reimbursement. So today, for example, teleconsultation and teleexpertise are normally reimbursed in France, and you can call your doctor in the south of France if you are located in Paris, and you will get paid by the payer. But telesurveillance is not yet reimbursed, and this is what I will show you. The other ones, the two other ones, so the medical, the emergency center and the teleassistance are already in place. So, these teleassistance, which is the preliminary of this ETAP, which I don't know if you heard about this program. The first experimentation was released in 2014 in the French social security legislation. At the beginning, it was only 9 regions eligible for this program. But in 2017, they extended to all the French regions. And they started with some very specific programs. When in 2018, for example, they extended it to 4 chronic diseases. For heart failure, to 2016, heart failure, renal failure, and COPD. And in 2017 for diabetes, and also for implantable heart prosthesis. So the process that was set up in 2017 was very, very simple. I mean, and the companies were really happy, and it was a 4 years experimentation programs. The first time that an experimental program was working so well, the companies only needed to declare to the French ministry website, to declare their activities to the regional agencies, to be, of course, to make a declaration to the Liberty Institution, a national institution, to the CNIL, and get the administrative documents from the French Social Security. And this is all the deployment of ETAP. And today, after 4 years of experimentation, ETAP will be integrated in the normal reimbursement. I have been part of the recent negotiation because we had to set up the new references for ETAP. The new references for ETAP, and to negotiate the new tariff with the French Ministry of Health. But now that's now finished. Okay, in ETAP there was 2 types of solutions. For example, MyDiaby is a very easy solution which only sends alerts to the doctor. So this is a solution that will allow to save time and be very much more efficient in the diabetes pathway. Diabeo does the same, but also provide an alert management with a medical platform with nurses, which is also the case for ProMed and for Air Liquide, which is Chronic Care Connect. So today, and this is what has been recently accepted, these are the two prerequisites to be eligible for the new ETAP. We have to be compliant. The company or the solution, the application should be compliant with the interoperability and security standards, and also have to be registered as a remote monitoring activity on the specific, which is TLS, telesurveillance, TLS list, which is the Article 36 of the new social security legislation of 2022. It's also need to be medical CE mark. That is sometimes an issue, and we are discussing about this today, and to respond to the HAS new standards or new references. So the guidelines have been published, so it's available today for the four chronic diseases, and this is the pathway actually to get to get the reimbursement. So basically, this is now the pathway for this year. So between early January to July, there will be discussions on the transition between the ETAP experimentation and the new reimbursement. For all the companies that have been on the ETAP program up until now, they have 1 month in July to declare their activity to the HAS. And if they do it, then they can stay on ETAP until the end of the year. For the companies who don't do it, then they will be removed from ETAP, and they have to. There will be a radiation, and after the end of this year, then the new system will start. Okay, so as a conclusion, so we are now in the transition to what we call the common law, the normal reimbursement system. The HAS guidelines have been published. Tariff negotiations are almost finalized, and just for your information, so they started very low, and all the companies were a little bit upset, but finally we could negotiate the same tariff as for ETAP, which is basically 600 euros per year and per patient in average. The timetable for deployment has been set, and of course there are some questions. So, but the questions are the distinctions between the new solutions which are supported by strong clinical, and could they potentially get better price? The evaluation procedure by the CNEDIPS is not completely finalized. There are also questions on the VAT and on the registration in common law. So the last part of my presentation is about the go-to-market. The go-to-market is something that we understand sometimes for companies that are not present in France. We faced a problem sometimes when we go and do the market access, we present the dossier. If the company is not present, that could be an issue. So this is executed in parallel to the market access. So basically, this is because there are 5 tactical needs. We have to enhance the probability to get reimbursement with a premium price in due time. We have to build a community of early adopters, so French key opinion leaders, who wants to commit as influencers for the new technology. We have to optimize the time frame of reimbursement submission to set up a commercial pre-launch, plan a full commercial setup by assessing the best sales and marketing options. And also this is something that we can do on a very flexible way, so that could avoid the company to hire a full-time person in France when they are still with many uncertainties about, the reimbursement, about the probability of getting the reimbursement, but also about the timing. So this is a go-to-market strategy that will be very flexible and be completely aligned to the market access strategy. So for example, you have a step one, building up a community of early adopters willing to support when you are doing the feasibility and preparation of the reimbursement dossier for submission. The step two will be to implement a commercial pre-launch when you will get the positive decision from HAS, which means that you know you will get the reimbursement, but you don't have the price yet, and it's not completely official. It will still take a couple of months. Then you have to planning the full commercial setup, and then you're ready to distribute your product in France with the official publication of the pricing decision. So this is basically all the detailed tasks that are executed within these different steps that you could see at the bottom of this slide with HAS, CEPS, CCAM, and until the publication of the official journal. So on this last slide, I explained to you, it is very, very important to have in mind, this is something which I advise that, and I can see in our experiment, there's a massive gain of time and money if one, you know exactly how your device will fall. Sometimes it's so complex to set up a clinical trial, to set up so that sometimes it's easier to go directly to the DRG or maybe not get to the reimbursement. But it's also very important if you know that you will get to reimbursement, you know that you will have to develop a clinical program, then to think globally. I have to do a clinical study. I will do it for my CE mark, of course, but if I think about reimbursement, maybe I can also have an early meeting with the HAS, also with Germany, with the EQUIC, also with NICE, why not, and all these HTAs, so that I'm sure that this clinical study will be useful for many countries, because, for example, in France, of course, it's better to have French centers, but it's not an absolutely necessity. We have, for example, this company Neovasc, they provided a study with Canadian centers and German and Italian. There was absolutely no French center, and we got the reimbursement. So it's important to know it, to have the good clinical program, and to be sure that you can use it in multiple countries, and to know exactly how you will finish. Will I finish on LPPR? Will I finish only on DRG? Should I need a CCAM? And think about exactly the same on Germany, etc. And depending on the result, choose the right country to where you will develop your market access strategy. So this last slide is everything that are every task which is involved in this market access route. One is the strategy at local, national, European level. This is exactly what I just said. The second one is public affairs. When I was giving you the example of Forfait Innovation and PCT, of course, we have very close relations with the French authority, and even for ETAP, I was myself member of different task force, the ministry, to discuss about these new digital programs. So this is public affairs is very important. Medical writing is also very important, because the quality of the dossier should be on top. Otherwise, you may fail. And HAS is very sensitive to the high quality medical writing. You have to understand what you're doing. So the training is important. And the last point is pricing and negotiation. So sometimes there are companies that don't know the tricks that the CPS is doing, and sometimes it's very important that they are supported in the pricing negotiation, because again, keep in mind that you are negotiating a national price. If you fail and if you accept too early a price, don't be afraid to wait weeks and months and to get the price you want. And sometimes we started a negotiation with CPS at 1,000 euros, we finished 15,000 euros. So this is important, to be very hard on negotiation with the CPS at national level. And the last is also to be able to talk, and we do it with investors for the business development. Okay. So I think I'm finished. And if you have questions.
Thank you, Michel, for your excellent presentation. Definitely, French healthcare's ecosystem is complicated, but your presentation has been very educational in this way, with very interesting tips for companies aiming to access the French market. We have already some questions in the Q&A chat, so we are going to start in a few seconds with the session. Para l'audiència, ara tenim algunes preguntes, però és el moment de fer-nos arribar alguna pregunta més si teniu dubtes sobre el servei o sobre la presentació de Michel. Intentarem respondre a totes les preguntes, sobretot les que siguin més genèriques, i si hi ha alguna pregunta més específica intentarem respondre-la de manera més particular durant els propers dies. Christophe, podem començar amb el Q&A? Si et sembla?
Sí, perfecte. And I wanted to thank you, Michel, for this brilliant presentation, very rich, accurate, and I think necessary to understand the French market. So we have a first question from Josep Maria Escuer. He has two questions, but I think the two questions are related. So he's asking if it's possible to sell a medical device without reimbursement, and if there is a totally private health market. So I think you just explain it a little bit at the beginning, but if you can just...
This is a very, very important question. And sometimes when we do this strategic evaluation, we always propose it. Yes, the answer is yes. We can have, because I said that there's some local funding. And sometimes, so for example, today I have a situation where the company is doing between 2 and 3 million turnover without reimbursement. So they have a strong sales force. They go to hospital. Of course, there's a very strong need for this device, and the doctors, they want it, and they are able to negotiate with the hospital some local funding. But they are doing between 2 and 3 million. And sometimes we face a situation when in parallel they go to normal reimbursement, and at the end of the day, with the price the CPS is providing, they are not doing a lot more. And sometimes you can raise the question. So the question should come early, because if you are happy with that, maybe you can take your time and don't hurry and be smart. Because if at the end, for example, you sell your device a certain price, but you have to accept 50% of that price and do exactly the same turnover, why should I spend 100,000 euros and millions to get clinical developments and reimbursement to have exactly the same result? So, but of course, again, when I said that we have to think globally, it could be useful. But the answer is yes. And what was the second question, Christophe?
If there is a totally private market.
Yeah,
related.
Not exactly. Yes and no. So the totally private market is for specific patients. For example, not French people that will come to France, for example. Then, of course, for example, they go to an American hospital in Paris, so they will pay 100%. Or so any patient that will go to France, it's not like, for example, in a public hospital, then of course they will pay and they will be treated, and the hospital will send an invoice, and either themselves or their private insurance will be able to pay. But the condition is you have to be non-French to be eligible for this totally private. There's another sector, specific sector. It's at the border between France and France and Switzerland and Italy and Spain, etc. for these cross-border workers. And for these workers, I mean, there's also a complete private branch, but dedicated to these cross-border workers. So it's not a totally for everybody, it's for dedicated patients and basically non-French.
All right. Thank you. Later, you want to carry on or? With
yes, Pablo asks, which is the title of LPPR for digital therapeutics, the DIGA in Germany? You were talking at the beginning.
The DIGA is a tap. It's about an equivalent, and people say that we have copied the tap, and I know that it's not exactly the truth, because if you know the history, I can tell you about the history. Actually, this is not the case. The reality is that when we started the digital program, we took a German example, but it was not DIGA, it was well before, and then we set up the ETAP program, and ETAP program and DIGA, so there was strong discussion between the two countries. So we cannot say today what is the one. But the answer to this question is, yeah, it's ETAP.
ETAP.
Okay, ETAP is the equivalent of DIGA, but I think that this question was also in which title of our PPR. You were mentioning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Would you position a digital therapy?
Title 1.
Title 1. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Next question from Xavi Comas. Merci, Michel. Would this process will be the same for the domiciliary healthcare service, not devices?
Yeah, again, why Title 1 is because Title 1 is a split between the cost of a device and healthcare services. When you get a product on Title 1, then this is a two-way negotiation, because this is, for example, we negotiated, for example, a device which was, I don't know if you know the live vest. So it's a kind of it's a device that a heart failure patient will wear and will deliver an ICD. It's a wearable ICD device, and it's provided at home. And of course, there's a strong part of the cost of the device which are services. And again, this type of device is on Title 1.
Okay.
And to answer the questions, yes. So either this will be Title 1 or maybe a new title, specific title in the future. But same philosophy.
And last question from Accedeix. There are special requirements other than the ones from MDD and MDR for being listed in LPPR, such clinical studies over French people or conducted by French hospital or centers?
You have to make some inquiry. So there's basically, we know that certain devices should probably go to LPPR, but it has to be double checked because sometimes it's not obvious, you know. On the French system, so when they started with the DRG system in 2005, they wanted to include all the devices within the DRG, just like in Germany. But at the end of the day, they understood that keeping certain devices on the LPPR was certainly the other way. It was not possible to integrate all the devices within the DRG. But for example, a heart valve, a surgical heart valve today is within the DRG. An ICD today is within the DRG. It's no more on the LPP. But the TAVI, the stents, they are still on the LPP. So it depends on, I mean, the criteria to be on the LPP is when the case mix of a DRG does not allow to integrate it in a dedicated DRG because they don't want to multiply the number of DRGs. So that's the reason why, because of this heterogeneity of devices, they have to keep the LPP. All right.
Thank you, Michel. With this question, we finish the Q&A session. Thank you very much for your collaboration. Per a la resta de l'audiència, us recordem que les presentacions i la gravació de la sessió estaran publicades a partir de demà amb l'enllaç que us hem posat al xat i que les inscripcions estan obertes tant per a Alemanya com per a França com per al Regne Unit. Teniu l'enllaç també al xat i les inscripcions estaran obertes fins al dia 22 d'abril. Per qualsevol qüestió o qualsevol dubte em podeu contactar també directament a les dades de contacte que us hem posat al xat. i acabar donant les gràcies a tots els ponents per la seva participació, a totes les entitats que han col·laborat amb nosaltres per dissenyar i difondre aquest nou servei, al programa Enterprise Europe Network amb el que hem finançat aquests 3 primers seminaris i, òbviament, a tots vosaltres per connectar-vos avui o per veure aquest webinar en diferit. Confiem en que el nou servei sigui del vostre interès i esperem veure-us en les properes sessions. Moltes gràcies i fins aviat.